Thank you everyone for joining. We're going to kick things off today. So for quick introductions, my name's Matt Horton. I lead go-to-market strategy for Publicis Commerce. And I know a lot of you are familiar with our group and what we do, but if today's your first time joining us, Publicis Commerce is really our full stack, purpose-built unit within Publicis that provides end-to-end commerce experiences across our agencies and clients. We have over 10,000 global experts that are responsible for driving the products, process, and partnerships that power our overall commerce capabilities across Publicis. So with that comes a need to stay at the forefront of industry through a strong presence at events, various marketplace opportunities. And so you may have heard about this little thing called Shoptalk, right? Well, today, our collective team is here to share some of the key insights from the event that have become really crucial for retail changemakers, as well as more broadly across the marketing and advertising industry. As we see the rapid advancement of commerce and retail media offerings, we're really using these events and the connections we can make there to think about what's coming next in the retail space. So this year, you may have seen Publicis show up at a variety of ways throughout Shoptalk. We had show floor booths that were hosted by our teams at Epsilon, Citrus Ads, and CJ. We had a dedicated attendee workshop led by our Global Commerce Strategy Officer, Jason Goldberg. And we had over 50 employees attending, inclusive of commerce leads from Profitero, Publicis Sapient, Digitas, Spark, Starcom, Zenith, and many more. Throughout the entire experience, we worked very hard to be the eyes and ears for our clients, for all of you. And we've tried our best to aggregate this information on new technologies, new announcements, and what's to come in retail for 2023. So we're very excited today to have Jason Goldberg join us and talk through some of the core themes that really dominated Shoptalk this year. So I'll hand it over to Jason. Throughout the session too, the chat function is open, so feel free to drop questions into the chat, and then we'll have time at the end for Q&A. So Jason, on to you.
Hey, thanks so much, Matt, and thanks everyone for joining us. My goal is to give you a really concise recap of all the things you might have missed if you weren't able to make Shoptalk this year. And even if you were able to make Shoptalk, you may have found that it was hard to attend everything you wanted to attend because there was a lot of things going on in parallel. So hopefully through the conversations I've had with a bunch of my colleagues, we've been able to recap the gist from all the parallel sessions, and we'll try to give it to you here in a bite-sized chunk. And please do use the question and put your questions in chat. I've invited a couple of my fellow travelers, David McDonald and Allison Lundy, to join me. And we'll be happy to talk with you about any of the things that we observed at the show. But so the show was last week in Las Vegas. It's at Mandalay Bay. Gosh, at this point, I want to say it's about a 7 or 8 year old show. And the Shoptalk just before the pandemic in 2019 had about 10,000 attendees. So then in 2020, they didn't have the show. They brought it back in a very limited basis in 21 and in a more extensive basis last year in 22. But this year is really the year it felt like Shoptalk was completely back. And so the level of attendees was like on par with 2019. They announced that there were over 10,000 attendees at the show. It felt very busy. It felt very vibrant. One of the things we always particularly like about Shoptalk is it's a great networking show. So there's lots of formal and informal opportunities to meet your peers and really interesting, smart people in the industry and share ideas. And it definitely felt like that was back in full force in Las Vegas this year. So what I've done is kind of consolidated all the frequent talking points that came up both on the show floor, in the sessions, and also sort of in the hallways into 4 big areas. So we're going to talk a little bit about retail media networks, of course. We're going to talk about social commerce and shoppable video in particular. We're going to, talk about what has become the hottest topic in commerce at the moment, which is artificial intelligence. And we're going to wrap up with kind of an interesting trend around retailers becoming platforms. So one thing that is unique about Shoptalk is in addition to the sessions and the exhibit hall and the sort of social events, another key component of this show are one-on-one meetings. Vendors are allowed to, for free, highlight any attendees that they would like to meet at the show, and attendees are allowed to highlight any vendors they would like to meet at the show. And in fact, some retailers could have their registration fee paid for if they agreed to at least take a certain number of these meetings. And then Shoptalk has sort of Tinder software that matches up parties that want to meet with each other. So it's kind of a double opt-in, and they book all these one-on-one meetings. And this year they booked over 50,000 meetings at the show. And because they weren't so obligatory, the vibe we got is that people on both sides got a lot of value out of the meetings, and that they were generally productive and favorable. And they're very rigorous. They're time boxed to 15 minutes, so it's sort of a very short, efficient conversation to help discover something that you might want to learn more about. And then one big announcement on the first day of the show is that Shoptalk actually announced that next year in 2024, they're adding another show. So here in the United States, Shoptalk has always been a March, April timeframe show, and the founders of this show have a show dedicated to food called Grocery Shop that tends to be in late September. And so this year they've said, hey, in addition to the two shows in Las Vegas, we're adding a second Shoptalk in Chicago in fall. So they're calling this Shoptalk Fall. So in 2024, we'll have two occasions to all meet as an industry at the Shoptalk event and take part in all this kinds of content. And for those of you that know me, I happen to live in Chicago. So I'm looking forward to hosting everyone at the inaugural Shoptalk Fall next year. So mark October 8th through the 10th on your calendar to come hang out with me and talk commerce in 2024. So that being said, let's jump into the trends. You really can't talk about commerce or retail these days without talking about retail media networks. As Matt mentioned, Publicis hosted a workshop, and our workshop was slightly broader than retail media networks. The topic for our workshop was new approaches to data monetization for retailers. So we were really kind of doing a survey of all the different ways that retailers could make money on all of this first-party data that they've already collected or are contemplating collecting. And I was lucky enough to have the VP of marketing from Vitamin Shop in the workshop with me, and so we had sort of a real practitioner's perspective to all of this. And we're going to give you the kind of really Reader's Digest version of that session. Essentially, there's kind of three ways for retailers to monetize their data. They can sell their data to other folks, they can rent their data to other folks, or they could use their data to have more richer experiences that have better economic outcomes. So when we talk about selling, we're talking about things like literally anonymizing your data and selling it to brands that want more insight about how consumers are interacting with brands inside of a retail store or on a retail website, and what their shopping habits and preferences are. And so for a long time, Amazon has had a paid service called Premium Retail Analytics. They've kind of sunsetted that, but they have a variety of other paid data products at the moment, including an in-store analytics product. Walmart has set up a whole division. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, called Walmart Luminate, that sells data. Kroger sells data, and sort of the original selling of data model is there are folks like IRI, Nielsen. There are a variety of stock market analysts that all want insight about how consumers are shopping in retail stores, and they will pay for anonymized data. So one thing you can do is just sell your data. But increasingly, instead of selling the data to someone and giving it to them once and letting them do what they want with it, we're renting the data to them. And when I think of retail media networks, I really think of them primarily as a way of retailers renting their data to brands. We all kind of know this story at this point, but for a long time, Amazon had this line item on their earnings statement called Other, and it was an increasingly large chunk of revenue. And during the pandemic, Amazon disclosed that line item was predominantly advertising revenue, which I think most of us expected. Based on their last quarter's earnings, in the last 12 months, Amazon has earned $32 billion in advertising revenue. In general, advertising revenue from retail media networks is very high margin. Conservatively, I estimate that Amazon probably makes 75% gross margin on that business. And so that means that retail media networks at Amazon contribute over $24 billion in earned income to Amazon. And many of you, when we talk about Amazon, hear this old myth that Amazon Web Services is the most valuable business at Amazon. Well, Amazon Web Services contributes $22 billion to Amazon's earned income. So retail media networks is actually the most profitable business at Amazon. This year in retail, we're really talking about it as the year of efficiency, as people are really focusing on operating efficiencies and improving their margins. And they really have a lot of margin pressures, particularly driven by inflation and some other factors. The ability to earn high margins through retail media networks is just too enticing for retailers to pass on. So we have a ever increasing number of retail media networks that are emerging in the marketplace. And a lot of the sessions at Shoptalk were about best practices for a retailer to launch a retail network, best practices for a retailer that's already launched a retail media network to expand it. So a lot of those conversations are about moving to offsite media. So the retailer buying ads on their advertisers' behalf that might show up in Google or Facebook, moving to in-store retail media networks. So opportunities for ads to show up on a shopper's mobile phone or on a digital screen inside of a retail store. There are a lot of conversations about making those retail media networks more efficient for retailers. And there were a lot of conversations targeted at brands talking about how they can maximize the opportunity of these networks, tools they can use to centralize their buying and automate their placements, how they should be thinking about analytics. At the moment, it's kind of the Wild West in terms of success criteria across all of these networks. And so it's very hard to compare apples to apples. So we're starting to see a lot of solutions around normalizing the data that you get from all of these different retail media networks. So all of that was a really big, meaty conversation that a lot of content was dedicated to. There were at least a dozen exhibitors at the show, including certainly CitrusAd from Publicis, that were really focused on solving some of these problems on behalf of big and small retailers. So the renting of data through retail media networks was really a big story. And then the last way that retailers could sort of monetize data was they could use the data to deliver better customer experiences, right? To build better audiences, for example. And so, again, with privacy issues in mobile devices, depreciating first-party data from social networks, the retailer's first-party data has become more valuable, and that's really become one of the attractive features of these retail media networks for advertisers is that you can do closed loop attribution. Increasingly, we're seeing clean room opportunities where an advertiser or brand can bring their data in a privacy safe, anonymous way to a retailer's data. They can get some insight that they can take action on. And we've seen a lot of sort of walled garden versions of this, like if you're just advertising on Amazon, you can use Amazon Marketing Cloud as a data clean room. But increasingly, we're seeing folks like Epsilon offer channel agnostic clean rooms that you can bring data from across all of your partners together to get new insights. And then, as I mentioned earlier, one of the big opportunities in these retail media networks is to push ads to other places that are better targeted because of the first party data that retailers have on the retail media networks. We're also seeing some really interesting ways that retailers have been able to use data to generate dynamic marketing campaigns and change their promotional offers and change their marketing campaign content on the fly for different audiences to maximize the efficacy of all these marketing messages. So, that's an example of using retailer data to get better outcomes, as L'Oreal is doing with Walgreens, for example. Retailers' customer affinity programs are a particularly good way of retailers using their first-party data to deliver better experiences for their customers. Sephora Insider is a good example here. They do a lot of predictive consumption to tell customers when they're likely in need of replenishment of a product they bought from Sephora, and drive more sort of auto replenishment opportunities. So all of those were the kinds of conversations that came up in retail media networks. Matt mentioned there's about 50,000 experts at Publicis on commerce. They're all more expert than me in retail media networks. So we'll have a couple on if anyone has any questions about those. But another big talking point at this show was social commerce. And there were a bunch of platforms that had keynotes. So this is Bill Reddy. He's the CEO of Pinterest. He used to be the head of commerce at Google. And I think before that, he was eventually a part of the original team at PayPal. So a really experienced commerce guy. And he came out and talked about how historically Pinterest has been like window shopping in the digital world. And the problem has been that you're window shopping in the middle of the night when all the stores are closed. And he pointed out that the window shopping was so good that people were willing to do it, even though you actually couldn't buy any of the things you saw in those windows. And that the big initiative at Pinterest for 2023 and beyond is to open up all those stores so that you're window shopping a store that you could actually walk into and buy stuff from. And so he really talked about how Pinterest was going to be leaning into enabling commerce across their platform. He feels like there is higher buying intent for users of Pinterest than other networks, and he really highlighted the brand safety aspects of Pinterest. That because they don't have some of the social features of some other social media, they don't have some of the potential brand risks that some of those other platforms have as well. And so he felt like they're more of a brand safe social platform with very high buying intent. Last year, they launched a new social product that's targeted at Gen Z that's even more commerce oriented. It's called Shuffles. And so at Shoptalk, they announced that they were enabling native checkout in Shuffles. And it sounds like we can expect to see, more leaning into commerce at Pinterest. At the same time, there were clients talking about how they were leveraging social commerce to drive their business. So Joanne's the CEO of Tapestry, that's the parent company for Coach. And she talked about how, people used to discover new handbags by visiting a store or visiting a department store. And increasingly that discovery doesn't happen on a mannequin or in a dressing room. That discovery happens on TikTok or Instagram before a customer ever gets to the store. And so how important it is for Coach to show up in the right way across all of these social networks. And for Coach, a big part of that is micro-influencers and partnering with people that have influence over a very targeted audience. And one of the things she was most excited about was using all those Coach sales associates from the stores as micro-influencers and stylists. And so Coach was really leaning into enabling those store associates to be the front line of social commerce on behalf of Tapestry. One sort of social commerce platform that was born to be commerce centric is Verishop. It was founded by Imran Khan. He talked a lot about how historically you come to a social network either in a social mode or you come to a retailer in a buying mode, and that it's very hard to switch that context of that consumer. He said that even if you do, in general, the post-purchase experience on social network stinks because, they weren't born to do commerce. So there are all these things that consumers want when they order a product. They want a delivery promise. They want warranty information. They want fitment payment information. They want to be able to add the promotion code that they forgot to add when they bought the product. They want to be able to understand how they can return the product if it was accidentally purchased. And a lot of those kinds of post-purchase experiences tend to be lacking on social networks that add a native checkout. And so, he was lobbying for these sort of purpose-built networks like Verishop as being more advantaged. Now, one of the things that's interesting, there was a lot of conversation at Shoptalk about live streaming and shoppable video. And the general consensus is live streaming is probably overhyped at this point, that there's only certain use cases where live streaming is really reaching an audience, but the shoppable video has a lot of potential. And of course, the big distinction between those two is live streaming is live. So the video is only available when the creator is broadcasting it, and shoppable video is stored. So it can be watched by a much larger audience over a longer period of time. And so in that context, what was interesting is Amron was saying, hey, we support both. And live streaming can be super effective. It can be one of the highest converting media types we have. It's just really hard to build an audience for it because it's much easier to put a piece of content up and have people watch it over the course of a month than it is to put up a piece of content for 5 minutes and have that only be available for 5 minutes. And so he said, one of the things that they're experimenting with is using AI to chop up that 5-minute live stream and turn it into some reusable video assets that could show up on product detail pages and things like that. One of the challenges there is at the moment, most of the successful live streaming has one of two components. It has scarcity. So they're selling something that they're about to run out of, or it has deals and deal scarcity. So we're offering a deep discount, but only if you order in the next 5 minutes during this live stream. And so both of those kind of contents don't tend to do well when you then store them and play them later after you've run out of product or after that promotion has expired. Another platform that had a big presence at the show was TikTok. They were a level 1 sponsor, which is the highest level of sponsorship. They had a big booth in the middle of the show. Earlier this year, TikTok launched a really robust native checkout feature for TikTok called TikTok Shops. Originally, a number of Shopify vendors, which Shopify was pre-integrated into TikTok Shops, launched selling experiences on TikTok. And then at Shoptalk, ELF Cosmetics announced that they were launching a TikTok shop, and they're a company that natively does their commerce on Salesforce Commerce Cloud. So we're now starting to see brands that sell on Shopify or on Salesforce have a very easy path to launch native checkout in TikTok as well. So we're continuing to watch the evolution of that social space very closely. The third topic, and the one that probably got the most airtime but got the least presence in the agenda, is artificial intelligence. And the quagmire here is there were a few sessions at the show that were intended to be about artificial intelligence, but the huge hype behind, in particular, ChatGPT didn't really happen until after the agenda for Shoptalk was already set. And so you didn't necessarily have a lot of sessions that were dedicated to AI, but it made its way into the conversation in almost every session. And one of the things I found funny is I sort of scraped the exhibitor directory for Shoptalk, and there's 683 exhibitors at this year's show. 23% of them claim that they're using AI in their product solutions. So the vendors are all in on labeling their solution as an AI solution. And sometimes that's very genuine, and there's some really robust AI features built into a lot of the solutions on the floor. But there also was a lot of sort of dubious labeling where, a lot of vendors kind of relabeled something that they were already doing as AI because it's sort of the buzzword of the moment. But it did come up an awful lot in the keynotes. And so Chip Berg, who's the outgoing CEO at Levi's, talked about, some of the initiatives they've been using. A lot of people talked about using AI for supply chain efficiency and demand forecasting. But one of the things Chip said is that they have a significant expense around models and licensing the models. When you look at apparel on the web, a lot of apparel pictures have the head cut off the model because they don't want to pay the talent fees for all these models for sometimes hundreds of millions of SKUs. And so at Levi's, they're actually using generative AI to invent models that they own that are now modeling all the clothes at Levi's. So some controversy around that. And, you know, Chip didn't say, hey, we know it works and we're doing it, but he said it certainly warrants an experiment. And so we're leaning into that experimentation. You know, of course, Google is a little bit under fire on AI because there's a perception that they're sort of behind some of these dedicated AI companies like OpenAI in search, and Microsoft Bing is a partner with OpenAI. And so, you know, the Sean Downey, the president of Americas for Google, was on talking about Google's strategy around AI. And he mentioned that AI is important in search and that they feel like they have a lot of products that they expect to bring to market. But he also highlighted a lot of the AI capabilities that are available via Google Cloud Platform for retailers and brands to use in their own experiences. And so, you know, he definitely wanted to sort of pivot off of search and talk about all the ways brands and retailers could use AI. He made us a nice list. He talked about, hey, you know, a lot of the use cases for AI are around how to grow your business, do better marketing, target ads better, find a bigger audience, find better lookalikes, those kinds of things. Another whole bunch was about operational efficiencies, storing the product close to where the customers are going to order the product, for example, and having a large quantity of the right product available. And then the third bucket in his mind was about new experiences that you could not do were it not for AI. So some of that is personalization and recommendations, but you know, one use case he called out is it's going to be a heck of a lot more common and successful to do shopping via computer vision. So, you know, take a picture of that person you saw on the street with a cool product and be able to buy that product, or see products in a mood board on Pinterest and be able to find, you know, the buyable version of that product using computer vision. So a lot of talk about that. Our friend George Harrison, who's the chief digital officer at Panera Bread, he talked about how they're doing all those things that Google just listed, but an area they're particularly interested in is the sort of efficiency of the in-dining experience or the curbside dining experience. So he said, you know, originally we leaned in a lot for the at-home experiences and those kinds of things, but now it's about you know, the right recommendations in that mobile order ahead, predictive upselling. So not just offering coffee with everything, but knowing, you know, what the customer is most likely to buy. And in particular, having the right labor model and the right training that's AI-based training for all of those in-restaurant employees to have them deliver the best possible experience on behalf of Panera. So a lot of AI conversation at the show was around empowering field sales forces using these AI technologies. Alexis Dupree's the chief supply chain officer at Nordstrom. She talked about how you know, there's a significant economic advantage to using AI in the supply chain, and how much more efficient they were getting by automating their fulfillment centers, and how much better they were getting at predicting demand for products, and therefore having a lot less waste. Meta was there talking about how you know, they're able to use AI for dynamic creative to create a better, higher click-through media opportunities on behalf of their clients. One of the interesting things at Meta is, you know, they've talked a lot about the big investment they're making in the metaverse, and there was kind of a subtle pivot that came through at Shoptalk, that a lot of the senior leadership at Facebook is spending their time not on traditional metaverse experiences, but on AI experiences. And they're kind of loosely labeling all this AI work as part of the metaverse. And I'm not sure that's sort of a fair semantic, but it does sound like Meta is leaning heavily into AI capabilities. And in addition to what they showed at Shoptalk, the week after Shoptalk, they launched a significant new capability that we'll talk about in just a minute. But also super interesting to hear Amazon that, talked about how rapidly they scaled during the pandemic, but that really at the cost of efficiency, and that they became very inefficient while scaling so quickly, and how now they're really trying to focus on operational efficiencies. Melissa Nick, who's in charge of fulfillment, she talked about how Amazon has 600,000 ASINs, 600,000 Amazon products that are available for same-day delivery in 90 markets in the US. And so she said, it's a huge economic deal to have those be the right 600,000 products, and have the right quantity of them in the right location, and how, in many parts of the United States, Amazon rolls multiple trucks to each residence every day to fulfill all this demand. And the more they could avoid multiple van rolls to the same location in the same day, there was a huge economic efficiency to be had there, and that they're getting a lot of those efficiencies over turning over a lot of those decisions on inventory allocation and supply chain management to these latest AI-based models. Just to kind of highlight some of the use cases that were most popular, there were a lot of vendors at the show that are talking about using AI to improve product content on product detail pages and product feeds. And so the general gist is, you're a brand manufacturer, say you're Wilson basketballs, you tend to send the same product feed to all your wholesalers. So Walmart and Target end up with the same product detail page with the same selling bullets and the same copy. And unfortunately, that means Google indexes that same product detail page from Walmart, Target, and Amazon. And because Amazon has some intrinsic advantages in SEO, that means when a customer does a search for this Wilson basketball, they're really only going to see the Amazon version of this product listing, and Walmart and Target lose out on the opportunity to earn that visitor. But what Walmart and Target could do, or what Wilson could do on their behalf, is they could write 3 separate sets of product descriptions, 3 separate sets of selling bullets, so that Google found the content to be unique and put them all in the search results. And one of the cool things you can do with all of these AI models is hand one product description to the AI model and get 3 equally good versions back, right? And so there's a commercial product called Jasper that was at the show. Jasper has built-in templates to write product detail content, or take unstructured content and turn it into structured content for all of these product detail pages. Jasper licenses the OpenAI technology, which is what drives ChatGPT. But of course, today you could use ChatGPT to write these descriptions yourself using the OpenAI APIs, or using the ChatGPT website. As some folks on this webinar may know, Publicis has an exclusive arrangement with OpenAI. So we have early access and first mover advantage on all the new capabilities that keep emerging in OpenAI's AI models. A big one this month is that OpenAI added plugins which now enable commerce on ChatGPT's own website. So you can you can plan meals and order recipes directly from that site. And to put things in perspective, that site is the fastest adopted technology website of all times. When Instagram launched, it took them about 30 months to get 100 million users. When TikTok launched about 5 years later, it took them 9 months to get 100 million users. And when ChatGPT launched their own website that customers could use for AI, they got 100 million users in 2 months. So in addition to AI being a capability that we can all build into our own experiences, there likely are going to be some new AI destinations that could be offsite platforms of the future that we all need to figure out how to work in. That's pretty interesting. I mentioned that Mark Zuckerberg and a lot of the senior management team at Facebook had talked about how they're really leaning into AI. This week, they launched a new generative image tool that could identify images from a photo and segment all the portions of that image with no human intervention. A lot of interesting things in commerce could happen with this, but let me just show you a super common one. This is a search result page on Walmart for sundresses. And if you quickly look at it, you're going to notice that there are two styles of photography here. 3 of the products are shot on a white background, and 1 of the product is shot on a lifestyle background, right, with a model. The other 3 don't have models. Walmart has like 300 million products in the database. A lot of this content comes from manufacturers. It's probably difficult to know whether that manufacturer had the rights to that model, but for sure that sundress looks different than the other 3. And so now, even at scale of 300 million SKUs, you can feed all these images to an AI engine like Meta's Segment Everything, and without clicking on a dress, without specifying what part I want to cut out or save, this engine can grab that dress with or without the model, with or without the model's head, and suddenly that search result can look much more uniform. And so using these kind of generative models to improve product content is a very high volume opportunity that lots of brands and direct to consumer companies are leaning into right now. Of course, the future may be that we sell the product before we ever make it, right? So here's 4 product images of a dress. 3 of these were generated by AI. One of these is an actual photograph. And you can see, that it's not so easy to differentiate the quality of these things. So maybe you only shot the dress on a mannequin and now you want to show the dress on a model in a lifestyle setting. Or maybe you only shot it on a model and now you want to show it in a variety of different lifestyle settings. Or even cooler, maybe you want to show the dress on the shopper that is shopping for the dress using a virtual mannequin. All of this kind of generative AI is now in the realm of possibility, and the quality is high enough that lots of retailers are piloting it, and in some cases really leaning into it. So I've been going for a long time. The last trend that we want to talk about is this kind of evolution of retail platforms, and this is one that I found really interesting. I mentioned there were 600 and something exhibitors at the show. 7 of those exhibitors were retailers, and often from the same company. So if you walked around the trade show floor, you would have found 3 Walmart booths. Walmart Marketplace signing up sellers to sell on the marketplace, Walmart Commerce Technologies, so licensing commerce capabilities like delivery from Walmart Go or a server capacitor from Walmart Commerce, and buying data from Walmart Illuminate via Walmart Data Ventures were 3 separate booths. 2 of those divisions separately were tier 1 sponsors of the show. So Walmart had a huge presence selling stuff to other retailers, and so did Amazon. They had 3 booths as well. They had a Buy with Prime booth, which is this controversial new capability to let a direct-to-consumer company have someone check out with Amazon, use Amazon Pay to pay, use Amazon Fulfillment to fulfill the order without the customer ever having to go to Amazon's website. And so there was a lot of talk about how some of the pilot customers that experimented with this were seeing 25% better conversion, that there were a lot of reasons to think it really worked well. There was also a lot of conversation about some gaps in the capability. So generally, if you're a D2C, you don't have your whole inventory in Amazon Fulfillment by Amazon. And so it could become problematic that you couldn't add multiple products to the cart and check out with all of them. That at the moment, Buy with Prime is primarily an instant checkout experience for single SKUs. In many instances, brands need to sell more than 1 SKU to be profitable. So a lot of interesting pros and cons on Buy with Prime. But what was interesting to me was there was a Buy with Prime booth, there was a separate Amazon Pay booth, and there was a separate Amazon Today booth. And if you're not familiar with Amazon Today, it's a product that got launched a little earlier this year, but it seemed like they really made the launch splash at Shoptalk that allows brick and mortar stores to list their inventory from the store on Amazon. And if a customer wants to buy something in that inventory, an Amazon Flex driver goes to your store, picks up the product, and delivers it to the customer. So if you're a mall-based retailer with a bunch of inventory in your mall stores, you can now sell that inventory on Amazon in addition to your mall via this Amazon Today offering. And then, of course, Instacart, which is, depending on how you count, the first or second largest digital grocer in the United States, was licensing I don't know, a dozen different capabilities that you could white label and buy from Instacart and use for your own experiences without the customer ever knowing it was provided by Instacart. And most of these services are now labeled carrot services. So they call it Instacart platforms. I call it carrot everything. But here's the big takeaway of this. Retailers, Walmart, Amazon, Instacart, that primarily made money selling stuff to people are now saying, we want a big initiative around selling stuff to other retailers. And so the analogy I use is, if you think back to the gold rush in California, that Amazon, Walmart, and Instacart are the three most successful gold miners in grocery during that gold rush. And what are all three of them doing? They're opening a shop in town and selling pickaxes to everyone else that wants to go mining. And so this is a really interesting evolution from being a wholesaler to being a platform. And it really changes the business model for all these retailers. And you hear the CFOs talking about how much higher margin these businesses are and how it really helps insulate the business from some of the ebbs and flows of the macroeconomic impact on the traditional wholesale model. So something we should keep an eye on. Lots of pros and cons to each of those offerings, but we'd be happy to talk about those offline. And then didn't have time to dive into it, but other topics that came up a lot at the show were the macroeconomic environment and, are customers trading down? Are they not? Are they weathering the inflation storm? Are they not? Have the pandemic behaviors regressed back to the norm? Have they not? All of those kind of conversations were happening a lot. A lot of conversation about the heightened expectation for convenience and rapid delivery and same-day delivery and new definitions for convenience. There continues to be a lot of dialogue around re-commerce and selling used goods and the environmental benefits of all of those and the margin benefits of those businesses. And lastly, there's a lot of hallway conversation about how, the bulk of retailers in attendance are really being asked to deliver more results with less. That this is not a year when they're, making a lot of strategic investments in acquiring more customers. That this is really a year when they're, trying to make safe investments that are likely to yield a short-term return and earn greater profits from the customers they already have. So those, in a nutshell, were all the kinds of conversations that I and my colleagues heard in Las Vegas last week. If you went, I certainly would love to hear what some of your takeaways were, or your impressions. But I do want to open it up to questions. I see we have a couple in the chat window. For sure, this deck will be available to anyone that wants to have it and use it with your clients or use it with your internal teams. But let's have a conversation about this. And so I do want to invite David McDonald and Allison Lundy to join me, and we'll be happy to take any of your questions. So the first question I see in chat, and there are not a lot, so either we nailed it and we overwhelmed you, or but feel free to add more questions. The first question, so we saw one about the deck, which definitely we're going to share the deck. Mary's mentioning that we will be getting a recording of this session and the deck to anyone that wants to use it. And I do see, apparently we turned on the question feature. Sorry, I didn't notice that. You can see what a bad moderator I am. What would you say are the biggest upcoming challenges in the retail media sell side space? So I certainly do have an opinion on that. Although, Allison, are you voice enabled? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I think David also might want to weigh in on that one.
Yeah. Do either of you have an initial thought about some of the upcoming challenges for sell-side retail media networks?
I don't know that it's, is this the question from Ray, in a recessionary environment? Is that one of the challenges? I think right now it's really just about an integrated model, And I don't think prices are going to come down. I'm sorry, I think we might be looking at two Q&As, but I don't know that they'll come down. I know that there were some changes to prices this year for some of the programmatic offerings based on feedback. But I think when we also think about it, these suppliers have committed money to retailers. So I don't know that they will come down too much because they have committed money already. But I think it'll be all about more strategic spending across all of their offerings as they continue to expand them.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, Allison. I'm curious if Allison or Dave, if either of you have an opinion. Like, one of the things I heard in some hallway conversation around retail media networks is, the biggest player in the space are getting some really good traction around the retail media networks. But for the longer tail networks that maybe have a smaller audience, that maybe have a smaller business and therefore less available capital to invest in the retail media network. Not that they're not being successful or that they don't have significant upside, but that they're just harder and slower than some of the retailers expected. And so, I heard a lot of conversations about, launching these things, sounds easier than it actually is. And, hiring the right people and having the right governance and having the right stacks and tool sets and data governances and all these things, that it's, that there's a significant opportunity here, but there's also a reasonably heavy lift to really get that opportunity. And that maybe some early adopters in the retail media space, maybe some of those companies on that slide that you and I showed, Allison, slightly underestimated the level of effort. Do you think that's a fair characterization, or do you think I'm high?
Yeah, it's a pretty fair characterization. I think when you look at it on the sell side, when you have a retailer that goes into it, sometimes they say, hey, I want to do everything. I want to do offsite. I want to do onsite. I want to stand up a team. I want to look at where I'm going. A lot of times you got to sit back and say, let's look at the traffic. Let's look at where you're going. Let's build a roadmap to get a smart way of going fast. What you can do first, it's looking at partnerships with a citrus ad, looking at them within their network. How do you get moving faster with that and just slower? Because slower sometimes, I don't mean by slower taking a multi-year, but thinking it through by channels and tactics. And I think one of the biggest challenges that we see on the sell side, I would say is data. Is your data organized correctly? And I think you touched on that as well, Jason, is getting governance and understanding the data there. But it's also that craziness of since 2020, there's been so many retail networks. How do you stand out amongst that kind of sea of logos where everyone else is? There's only so much dollars to go around. So how do you make sure that you're offering something to your buyers or your advertisers?
That's a great point. There's a bunch of fun AI questions in here. We'll throw a couple of them out. Ashley was asking whether there are turnkey AI solutions that, for example, Epsilon might be offering to use AI for creative, or whether it's kind of a roll your own situation at the moment, where you might be using Epsilon data, but you might have to build your own integrations to the large language model of your choice for these kind of customer experiences. And I don't think we're at liberty to disclose any future roadmaps from Epsilon, but at the moment, I don't think there's a lot of completely productized solutions that have these things integrated into them. What there are is a lot of sort of templates and business models to integrate these things together. So, it's entirely possible to get subject matter experts on your engagement that have a formal partnership with OpenAI to add that capability to your existing Epsilon CDP and do some dynamic creative. But there's not a dynamic creative button in the Epsilon stack at the moment. Dave, do I have that right, or am I missing something?
No, that's my understanding as well. You look at that, I think there's probably,
I do think that's going to evolve rapidly. One of the problems is a lot of these tools weren't good enough to use 2 months ago. And so, we're talking about AI with a lot of clients right now. And one of the questions they get asked is, hey, can we see the case studies? And we're like, Yeah, this wasn't possible 2 months ago, right? Or the version of it that was possible is wildly different than today. And very likely the capability that's available today is going to be rudimentary compared to the capability 2 months from now. And so it is an area where, like, if you're waiting for this to get completely baked and to have, perfect case studies and proof points, you're probably not in a position to be a first mover in this space, because it just is evolving so quickly. But to me, that does dovetail with another great question, which is, what are the perceived risks around, for example, brand safety with AI? What are some of the gotchas going to be, and how can client management teams get ahead of this shift fast? And I love this question because it's a very valid and legitimate question. There are a bunch of risks. There are concerns around brand safety, and those questions are often used as an excuse not to move fast in the space. And so the conundrum here is not to let those concerns have you opt out and not play and not get the outsized returns you can be from being a fast follower or first mover, but at the same time not put yourself too far over the skis. So just to kind of answer the direct question, there are a bunch of bad examples right now. Some of the generative image technology are getting sued for training their engines on images that they don't own. Getty is suing one of the companies, and there's going to be a huge job program for IP lawyers over the next 5 years to fight out the rights here, right? Like, every student in art school got to see pictures of Matisse, and that informed how they learned to make their art. And the AI engines would say, they're doing the same thing with the Getty images, and the, Getty copyright holders would say, no, that's not what you're doing, right? And so don't know where the law will fall on that. This week, some engineers at Samsung were disclosed to have shared some very scary proprietary code from Samsung with OpenAI's ChatGPT, because ChatGPT could help them debug their code and do their job faster. And that was a great idea, except when you upload that code, two bad things happen. OpenAI employees could see it, that don't have a non-disclosure agreement with Samsung, so it could get out into the wild. And that data could then be used to train OpenAI, and it could inform answers that go to Samsung's competitors. So, there definitely is risk around feeding proprietary information to the public available versions of this model. One of the keynotes was Jeffrey Katzenberg, who's famous, one of the founders of DreamWorks, gave a keynote at Shoptalk. And what he was talking about is he's now a venture capitalist, and he's invested in a bunch of companies. One of the companies he invested in is trying to solve this exact problem. They're called Naomi, and they're developing a version of this large language model AI that can only learn from a constrained set of data sources. So it can't learn from everything it sees or everything you might share with it. It can only learn from company approved data repositories. And so that gives you like a safer model. Of course, when you use the APIs to train your own models using this technology, you're not actually sending your data back to the providers of the tech. So, lots of issues there. But for sure, every retailer in America is terrified to launch a AI-based chatbot and show up on NBC having to explain why their chatbot, tried to convince their customer to break up with their spouse, right? So there are safety concerns here, but there are also, those concerns shouldn't make you not do something. They should make you do something with appropriate guide rails in place. I don't know, Dave or Allison, I'm assuming you haven't dove into the deep end of brand safety on AI engines quite yet?
Not too much, but I think if you think about the predictive AI and the imagery, there's some brand safeties that we can get that you can happen. But to be honest, those have always been there. You can go back years where Target gets sued on some of their product imagery. So you just have to have governance around it. But I think AI is giving us a faster way, and I'm thinking about the product imagery as well as and content, fastest way and more efficient way. Yeah.
So one question that came through is, with retailers trying to monetize their own data, What do you think this means for the likes of Nielsen and IRI, who have often, historically been data intermediaries that get data from those retailers and sell it to other people? Would you be buying IRI stock right now, Dave, or do you not want to weigh in on that?
I'll hesitate on weighing in on that, but I do think it's definitely an impact, and it's something we've actually heard. But this is the piece that goes into the value of your data. We've had some clients that were selling their data, and the advertisers, the buyers would go, well, what's different in this than IRI? IRI is giving you a better rate. So your data has to be impactful and not just, hey, so-and-so bought this. So I think that's where Walmart and Kroger are so huge that yes. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Jason,
would say,
almost think
jump in, Allison, please.
Just piggybacking off of what David said, I think in one of the sessions, the Stitch Fix, I think she was the CMO or CEO, she was talking about they collect 80 data points when someone in their shopping experience. And it was just about what are you actually going to use that data for to tell the bigger story? So how can a retailer put all of that information together in a package that's then more valuable than a Nielsen or IRI?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I was going to make a similar one with there's a funny analogy that like data is the new oil, and someone's like, yeah, but it turns out you don't actually make money on oil. What you make money on is oil refineries, right? And in the same way, like it's not about how much access to data you have. It's about how like you can turn that data into actionable insight and do something different and better because you have that data, right? And so at the moment, I would say like these new data sources from the retailer, complement the data that you can get from the data syndicates more than they replace them. But it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out in the future. Here's one that hopefully Allison can answer because I struggle with this one all the time. What should brands consider when determining the right budget mix allocated to retail media versus campaigns that drive to the brand's own website? There's an innate bias to drive to the brand's own website because first-party data is so valuable and there's more control over campaigns. But is that the right move if the majority of the brand sales still come from the retailer? So this is kind of the D2C versus, lean into the best wholesale retail tactics. Dave or Allison, you guys have any thoughts about how a brand should be thinking about that question, even what their framework should be?
I think, well, at Publicis, we do have a retailer prioritization tool. So I think that's one piece of it, and just determining, the right mix of spend for retailers. But then I think it's also about using the data again to understand who are those buyers that are more likely to buy on your site versus a retailer, and then using the right media channels to drive to each of those with the right messaging, just based on who that more likely cohort is that is buying DTC versus on the site. I think like a good instance is if you're a luxury beauty brand and you know that this particular buyer wants to check out at Sephora because they're part of the loyalty program, and they're more likely to buy other adjacent items in that purchase, then they might get a different message than someone who is, kind of, I am completely brand loyal. I don't care about samples in my box, and I will buy it from your site because maybe you do something else for me through your site.
I love that. That makes perfect sense. So 2 more questions, and then we're probably going to wrap to let everyone go to their next meeting. One is about AI impacting search engine marketing, right? So if Baird and Bing, OpenAI, and all these search engines are going to fundamentally change because of large language models. How does that affect how we think about SEO, particularly within the sort of consumer shopping journey for more complicated purchases or burden categories? Anyone have a thought about how SEO gets disrupted from AI?
It's actually a really great question. I think I break this question into 2 pieces. One is, how does SEO get done, and how does it particularly impact the customer shopper journey? I think the customer shopper journey is, you think about the AI is going to help learn to sell that burdened or complicated piece over time. So it's adapting to what's going on with the customers and what they're reacting to. I think the SEO, it comes back into, yeah, it's gonna help with the, you think about the language, the content. How do I optimize that? This is a piece of when I think about building out an SEO strategy. I think the content is going to be key for that. So I do think there's a positive piece. And I think the customer journey, AI is just going to adapt to figure out what works, especially in these complex journeys.
Yeah, I think the real answer is too early to tell. That this is, this is evolving so rapidly. Like, I think you'd be really dangerous to just assume an answer right now. But for sure, search is going to get disrupted. So be ready for it. The magic question is how. One thing I know is going to happen, and one thing I'm going to be watching closely, as AI gets used in these search tools more, it means we're going to shift from keywords to topics. Right? Like right now, people win in SEO by being really smart about all the permeations of a particular keyword, right? And the very specific vernacular that a particular customer uses. So if you're in cookware and you're trying to sell Dutch ovens, if you're the subject matter expert that knows that some places call that a croquette and some people call it a French oven and some people call it a Dutch oven, you can win by like having a really robust keyword strategy. In the large language model world, that expertise gets washed away. And what you really need to know is have the best content about that product, regardless of what name a customer uses for it. So it for sure evolves us from keywords to topics. But I will say, only partly because of AI, search is getting really fragmented right now. Like for a while, we had this kind of everybody starts their journey at Google. And today, all bets are off. Depending on what you're looking for, you might start on Google, you might start on a retailer network search engine like Amazon, or you might start on a social platform. And search on TikTok and Instagram is becoming really interesting, and they're investing a lot. And so I don't know how that's going to play out, if there's going to be a clear winner and losers, or whether different customer journeys will start on different search engines. But that space and that customer behavior is going to be something you're going to want to watch really closely as it continues to evolve. And AI is only part of the mix there, if you will. So look, there's a couple other questions. Maybe we'll try to answer those offline. I think we've used up our allotted time. Dave and Allison, I really enjoyed like briefly getting to hang with you guys in Las Vegas for a minute. And I certainly appreciate all your great thoughts and content as we put together this recap for all our fellow Publicis and clients. So I hope this was valuable. Send us your feedback and we'll continue to try to do these kind of things if they're helpful.